Hey guys, welcome back for another edition of the podcast. With me as always, Mitch Kurtz. And we're back for another round with one of our favorite doctors. It's Dr. Jamie Rickord. Jamie, welcome back and thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me back for another round.
Mate, we couldn't resist after round one.
The gloves are off for round two, I think.
Yeah, they absolutely are.
I think the gloves can come a little further off if you're asking me.
Bare knuckle facts, hey?
We had a good chat last time. We covered quite a bit of ground on not just cannabis, but alternative medicines in general and psilocybin, MDMA, how they kind of work. But
well, I'm going to say this as a put a marker in the sand. I think that the first round was us describing optimistically the potential for where this medicine both, can go in terms of its therapeutic applications, reaching that state of balance and homeostasis. I think you talked about it at length, Jamie, and I really liked that. And not to be a downer, but I feel that today we can maybe perhaps explore what is restraining that possibility and that hope, and what are the barriers, both, doctors, research, what is holding us back from getting further along in our knowledge and understanding of this medicine?
It's a really good question. And I ask myself the same thing most days, and then days like today. Days like today really make it quite an acutely important question. But I think we touched on it, and I think this is like really the crux of the issue, and we did touch on it last time, and we were talking about psilocybin, and if 20-25 milligrams of psilocybin in certain people can clear up decades of treatment-resistant depression to the point they get better, then in many ways, by definition, what we're currently doing is wrong.
Yes.
And that's the problem. If these deadly compounds that have been proved scientifically, nuts work in the UK, to be safer than everything else you can buy without alcohol, cigarettes, certainly most prescription medications, they're safer. That's the science, that's the fact. And then, to still be treating them the way we are that's the question, right? And I think the reason is because it proves that a lot of medicine's wrong. If the endocannabinoid system is that important that so many people get better when they're given cannabinoids, then it is a major omission in modern medicine. And for those facts to come through that we are correct and going to get people better, there's a whole establishment that has to admit it's wrong.
Well, and it's also, I agree 100% with that take. And I think that even someone who might be getting relief from these, ARTG listed medicines, approved medicines, whatever you want to call them, I think that even to the extent that somebody is getting some relief, if that relief is in respect of symptoms rather than actually going and treating root cause of someone's medical condition, I dare say it's wrong as well, because we're not actually giving that person the best medicine that we have available. But we know that there's a whole regulatory framework which governs what's approved, what's not approved, and we can jump into that. But I think just as a starting point, I think it'd be really good to have this discussion around what the barriers are. And I know, today of all days that we've caught you, I know you're dealing with the divergence of views within the medical profession and doctors. I'm well aware of this. We've had our own interactions with doctors who just simply refuse to acknowledge that cannabis can be used medicinally, and they just have a blanket aversion to prescribing it and think that it's crackpot science. It's
But this is the thing, right? This is the scary bit, because it's not crackpot science. I can give you a whole host of articles from the New England Journal or from Nature that talk about the science. It's there. It's been written, you know, and like, we're not talking about time machines, you know, we're not talking about warp drive. We're talking about, you know, stuff that people have been using for many millennia already. And now we have the scientific information, receptors, ligands, physiological systems, you know, fMRIs, brain scans for psychedelics especially, to show that this is a real physiology and this is working. You've got some of the greatest minds in, you know, neuroscience and psychotherapy saying, well, actually, guys, the psychedelics prove the basic Freudian principles of psychoanalysis, you know, like, and all the way through, like, it's proved by this stuff. These are the medicines that prove the physiology and the, you know, how the neuroscience of psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, and it's still being rejected.
But what if you actually take all of those things that you have just cited, which to me, in many cases, clearly substantiate a therapeutic application for cannabis? What about just anecdotal evidence that these these doctors are just refusing to acknowledge? I mean, it is literally the, you know, it's akin to putting on a blindfold and trying to talk to a patient. And it's why would you as a doctor not understand or listen to a patient telling you that they've tried this, even if it's black market, and it worked for them?
Why would you? That's what I think we're trying to get to. You know, that's the question we're answering. We talked about, you know, that statement in the Sydney Morning Herald that, you know, a pain specialist would rather send his patients to Dan Murphy's than to a cannabis clinic, cannabis doctor, right?
Yeah.
Now, beside anything, we know that alcohol is more dangerous than cannabis. It's been proved scientifically. So to even make that statement, beyond being a medicine, is doing harm. It's promoting harm, because you're promoting something that's more dangerous on a person and societal level than cannabinoids are.
But I would argue that he clearly doesn't think that. Like he genuinely doesn't think that.
He genuinely doesn't think that. I get it. But that's the question I'm asking, right? Because we have the papers and the facts to prove that statement is grossly inaccurate and in fact promoting harm. Yet nothing's happening. There's no recourse. He can say it in the Sydney Morning Herald. Oh yeah, okay, ha ha ha. You know, if I went out and said, you know, these people by whatever should be having THC instead of this, you know, hello medical board, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a whole different
and I think you know, we're talking about someone in Professor Michael Vag, who he made this comment, I think we've talked about him previously on the podcast, and actually tried to get him on the podcast. But yeah, he published an article, or he gave comments to an article that was published in March last year, where he was effectively championing a movement seemingly to blacklist, blacklist medical cannabis among Australian pain specialists. And he had that platform because he's the dean of Australia, New Zealand College of Anaesthetists. So he has clout, and it's just irresponsible. It's ignorant. It's reckless. I think one of the reasons I just really dislike the statement is because we have, you know, far from the kind of how recent medical cannabis has been available legally in Australia, there have been decades now of drug and alcohol research which talks to the harm profile of alcohol in our community. And so to make such a deliberately ignorant statement like that is really disappointing.
Totally. And let's put it from a different perspective. It's unscientific. You know, it's not evidence-based. Yeah. And it's illogical. So even if we just avoid some of the other words, it's unscientific, illogical, and it's not evidence-based. Yeah. And that's the very thing he's accusing us of doing. And that is the question. Why is that happening? You know what I mean? Because the very thing that we're being accused of, we talked about it last time. When I say to doctors, sure, I get it, there's not a lot of evidence in terms of RCTs and trials. And, you know, when we look at the reasons for that, it's because of the money involved in producing that evidence without getting a patent. Simple fact. That's why. Right.
Yeah.
So sure, there's not enough evidence because we can't do it in the current model, given how much it costs. But we look at the evidence for what we can prescribe. And we know opiates are out. GPs banned, don't prescribe them anymore. You know, there's been a big push, and it happened after I stopped prescribing them, but it's happened, so you can't be done. Well, benzos, SSRIs, there's limited evidence for the use of this stuff in chronic conditions, right? And sure, the same for cannabis. We can argue, sure, the same for cannabis. So what does that leave us with? Yeah, certainly not alcohol, Professor Vag.
Well,
you know what I mean?
In the interest of, you know, being fair, his comment was, and I'm quoting him directly, substances like alcohol are more effective pound for pound, but we don't have extended opening hours at Dan Murphy's for pain patients. I mean, what to even say to that quote?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? And for as long as that's acceptable, and what we're saying is not, we are really looking at a very, you know, I don't see how it's going to happen. And then the reason is why have such a strong stance when there is science and there's been research and there are receptors and we can sit down and talk about the physiology, can be demonstrated by the clinical prescription of cannabinoids at the right dose. You want to see this happen here, give them this much at this time and look what happens. Predictable, because when a molecule hits a receptor and you know what it does and you can predict the outcome. You know, that's what the pain specialists do. That's what the physicians do. That's what the psychiatrists do. And that's what we're doing, just with a different compound. There's no difference. We are standing on the principles of medical treatment that we were taught at medical school, bar the evidence. But I use my right, 20 years of training, to give a prescription and see if it helps. And if it helps and causes no harm, then I will exercise my right to continue prescribing it, as long as the initial prescription was appropriate, which is for a chronic health condition that has failed first-line treatments.
Yeah, it's
discussion over. That's it. You know what I mean? And I don't get the rest of it. And I don't get why it's causing so much vitriol. You know?
Yeah, and the opioid problem that we've seen across the Western world. I mean, I just find it strange that, you know, someone who specializes in pain medicine, you know, seems totally okay with their use, which is just caused so much harm to so many communities across America and you know, parts of this country as well. And yet, you know, is sort of lining up to take free pot shots. I mean, it's disappointing. I did actually, you know, in the spirit of being fair and balanced, I think I said I invited him to come on to the podcast, and he said, you know, I'm reading his email. He said, far from providing a balanced view about alternative medicine, it appears to be entirely about the benefits of cannabinoids thus far, and clearly has strong industry connections. And then he went on to say, as dean, he doesn't appear in interviews, educational or otherwise, which are directly industry sponsored. And he has declined multiple other speaking invitations for the same reason. Now, I want to put, you know, cards on the table here. We do this podcast voluntarily. We have never derived any income for doing it from a sponsor or anyone. We are here as an information resource to prevent, you know, we want to give people, we don't see it as our job to speak on behalf of doctors. We get doctors on the show to tell us about what it's like. We have had pharmacists. We've had people from cannabis companies, but often they're just talking about what their company is involved with on a commercial and, you know, what they're up to. So yeah, his allegation is actually completely false. And, you know, I told him in as much words in my reply, but I said to him, you know, the purpose of actually inviting you onto the podcast, you know, is to add a critical view of medical cannabis. And that, you know, effectively, if we're only focused on providing a pro-cannabis view, then we wouldn't approach anyone who has publicly expressed a critical opinion. which cautions against the use of medical cannabis. So I invited him to reconsider, but he never did. And, frankly, what more can you do with someone like that?
Not a lot. Why don't we do it? Why don't we talk about some of the negative sides of medical cannabis?
Yeah, I'd actually love to have that on. I feel like it's important to do, and we
right now.
Okay, go.
I don't know. I honestly, I don't recall any single one of our guests ever coming on and just saying, this is a cure-all. It's a wonder drug. Like, talk about things in a balanced way. We've asked so many of our guests throughout the journey, when doesn't medical cannabis work in your view? When we're talking to prescribers, what are some of the difficult medical conditions? So
well, let's do 5, right? Let's do the 5 bad sides of medical cannabis. Number 1, doesn't work sometimes. Doesn't work quite frequently, actually. So number 1, doesn't do anything. Positive or negative, mind, it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So we've put that to bed. Doesn't work.
It doesn't then breach the Hippocratic Oath, right?
Exactly, which is the point I made earlier. I give people a trial of something, and often it doesn't work, but it doesn't cause any harm, so I'm happy.
Yeah, the same definitely can't be said for somebody taking endone for more than 10 days. You know what I mean? It's
exactly.
Yeah. Anyway,
which has been curtailed. GPs are no longer really supposed to prescribe opiates for chronic pain. Fantastic. So we've got Panadol and aspirin and NSAIDs and physical therapy, which is great. That is a good start. NSAIDs, can't use them every day forever. So you've got Panadol, physical therapy. So after many years of modern medicine, the GP can now prescribe Panadol and send them to someone else to have osteo or physio, or medical cannabis if they're up for it, because the TGA allows it, we're not even going to go into that. And the number 1 downside of medical cannabis is it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. When you,
yeah.
Let's do number 2, right?
Well, number 1.
As part of an open and balanced conversation that I have with my patients when they come to see me. Number 1, it might not work for you. Let's manage expectations. I know that you're miserable and you've been in pain or anxious or you can't sleep, and it's been years and years and years, and you've tried everything and you're utterly desperate. But I'm sorry, this might not be the solution you're looking for. Number 1. Number 2, there are side effects. Anxiety, dry mouth, can make you sleep worse, may give you palpitations, can make you hungry, whether that's positive or negative. You can't drive because of the driving laws that exist in our country, exist in Tasmania. So
it might be worth just outlining that I assume we're talking about THC here.
Well, a bit of both, but THC mostly, yeah. I mean, CBD has some weird and wonderful side effects, but
I'm curious,
not often.
What's if there are side effects, what would they look like for CBD?
So I conceptualize it. So some people find THC can keep them awake. Sometimes they get kind of, it's almost like a reaction from a nervous system that doesn't want to calm down. So if someone's hypervigilant and they're really in that, for instance, and then you give them a medication that is asking the system to relax and go into more of a parasympathetic place. One thing I've noticed is people can have quite full-on experiences, voices in their head, that kind of stuff. But I think that's just a defense system. It's like their bodies just do not want to turn off this kind of hypervigilance, and it will do anything to prevent the hypervigilance being turned off. But that's a very much a sort of trauma-informed perspective, and much more one that comes up when you're doing psychotherapy with people. It's not I wouldn't say it's a mainstream paradigm that most GPs are going to learn about, because it's not really relevant to their practice. So unless you're into the mechanics of mind and psyche and different aspects to your sense of self and lost parts of your soul, which doesn't really apply to pain specialists or GPs, then there are very few side effects for CBD.
Okay.
So we're talking about THC. Yeah.
Hmm.
So we've covered that, right? It doesn't work for everyone, and there are side effects. So they're the two major
we're listening. We're
problems.
listening. We're
Well,
listening.
I'm trying to frame it, right? They're the two major problems of medical cannabis. What are the two major problems of any drug you might be giving someone for any medical condition? Number one, it doesn't work. Number two, there's some side effects. So medical cannabis is no different in that context from any other drug that a doctor prescribes for a patient.
I think
so. They're not really even downsides of medical cannabis, are they? They're downsides of being prescribed something by a doctor.
And so then you're absolutely right, and it's important to remember that approved therapeutic goods and unapproved therapeutic goods share something in common. They're both therapeutic goods.
Exactly.
It's just that the unapproved is not known within the system that we have here in Australia, because the dossier of evidence has not yet been provided for dosing to treat a particular indication. And that's going to be a lot of work, because the publicly available information released by the TGA provides that approvals have been sought for treating a patient with medical cannabis by Australian doctors for in excess of 90 medical conditions. Now, if every single one of those medical conditions had to be subject to its own phase 3 clinical trial, which it would need to in order to be an approved medicine, you see that there is so much work ahead. And imagine expecting that work should already be done now, when the industry is only 5 years old, thereabouts. So it's just these like unrealistic comparisons. And you're also talking about companies that really don't have as much to spend. And I just want to actually just take a shot here at Professor Vag, because, while you were just talking, Jamie, I realized Professor Vag actually spoke about a course in, betterpainmanagement.com. You can actually look it up. Now, this is a course that he's been involved with. And it says on their website, we gratefully acknowledge the generous project support from the following organizations. You have Pfizer, Janssen, which is a company from Johnson & Johnson. So I'm sorry, it's a hypocritical claim, and I can actually substantiate holding up a mirror to his claim, but he has not yet provided any evidence to say that we are a sponsored show. I got to call that out. I'm sorry. I'm just putting
it's part of the Hippocratical oath.
The hypocritical oath. I love it. But this is the thing. It's just so full of shit, and we have to deal with it.
We do, and this is where it's confusing, right? Because it feels more and more like science and evidence is only valid when certain institutions have said it's valid.
Yes.
So there's lots of valid science. There's books, there's papers about the endocannabinoid system, about psychedelics, there's trials, there are ongoing trials. Every major university in this country is now in a race to start doing psychedelic trials. No one's thinking about poor old cannabis, which is a shame. But there's a race on, and there's a race on. And why is there a race on? Because there are Nobel Prizes to be won.
Absolutely. And I think that the system design that we have and not just in Australia, but globally, I think it was paved with really good intentions. This idea that we would have the most comprehensive suite of phase 1 to 4 trial data, randomized control, all of these things, but it actually then creates these astonishingly high barriers for medicines to have to meet. And then it also, I think, creates perverse incentives for data manipulation. I'm not alleging that practice in relation to a specific medicine, but I think the system's design leaves that door open. Totally. And the other thing to remember is, of course, just the sheer cost of, first of all, if you have R&D departments of these big pharma and they have to recoup their costs, and they're sinking hundreds of millions of dollars on, global trials for the next blockbuster drug, there is just so much on the line for these companies. And cannabis is just, we don't come from that place. It never was. I know there are some big players, but they're not doing clinical trials with that much money. It's not even in the same ballpark as a Pfizer.
But there's another point to make here, which is a retrospective viewpoint on the data that's been used to get some of these other medicines registered. So they did trials with opiates.
Yeah.
And now we're not allowed to prescribe them for chronic pain. You know what I mean? We've done tens of thousands of people have been through for SSRIs. And now there's a great push to psilocybin because it ain't working. So again, I'm confused because we're being asked to use a system that's already, with hindsight, being proved to be somewhat flawed. Opiates are no good for chronic pain, but they were registered for chronic pain. SSRIs have not done that well for the treat. They help many people, but in the general clearing up depression and moving on and getting well, no. But they got through. So clinical trials said something. So again, this is what I find confusing. I'm not saying one's either correct or not, but it has to be logical, has to be scientific, and it has to be consistent.
Yes.
And it's the inconsistency that I and you guys want to call out.
Yeah.
And then what's more concerning is why? Why is that inconsistency present? Is it literally just unconscious stigma? That this stigma is so prevalent and so deeply ingrained that people are acting with stigma when they don't even know they are.
I think there's a whole socio-political element to it, especially when you look at the US over the last 100 years. But it is interesting to think about what you're talking about in terms of, like, if you want to say we're no longer allowed to prescribe opiates and things like this, or potentially SSRIs. It seems
opiates
like
we can't prescribe anymore. SSRIs we can.
Yeah, but it's interesting to think of them as a more refined kind of synthetic drug, so to speak. And they're now the archaic ones, whereas going back to things that we've had forever in the current form, pretty much, which is mushrooms and a weed plant. That's like the future. And it was like, hold on, that's the least future thing I could think of.
It's not in the future. Exactly.
It's ancient. Like,
exactly. Shouldn't have been stopped. Was going, psychedelic 60s shouldn't have been stopped.
Yeah, and
no
like
reason to ban cannabis as a medicine whatsoever.
And all the synthetic stuff is like seemingly archaic in the paradigm. Yeah.
But when a system produces that much inconsistency, that the system design says, if you jump through all of these hoops, you're totally good to go. And then 10 years later says, oh, actually, we've got a serious problem here.
Exactly.
I mean, clearly what hasn't been built into that system is studying long-term effects of use of that particular therapeutic.
Mate, I would argue logic hasn't been built into that system.
Yeah, totally.
But are we saying that opiates just don't work?
They've got no role in the treatment of chronic pain.
No, of course. They are, although useful.
They're good for acute pain.
Acute pain for.
I'm speaking anecdotally here, not as a doctor. I've come out of surgery and had a short course of opioids, and that's fine. But yeah, chronic patients that would be seeing a pain medicine. I mean, Jamie, you can speak to this. It's never right. Just doesn't.
Here's a good little fact, right? Let's go to acute pain, because I like acute pain. Because opiates work, right? That's why it's good to talk about it. Now, if you go to the UK or the US, whether you've snapped your femur, you've been kicked off a horse, broken leg, nasty, what do you get an IV infusion of when you get to ED?
Fentanyl?
Diamorphine. It's not used in Australia, but it's used in the US and Europe. What is diamorphine? That is two morphine molecules stuck together. What is that? That is heroin.
Wow.
Heroin is diamorphine. So in the UK or the US, you get your snap femur, you get an IV infusion of the best pharmaceutical grade heroin you are ever going to get your hands on. Do they worry about addiction when you leave 5 days, a week later? Nope. is there any follow-up whatsoever that you're going to have a horrible addiction because they've been infusing the best bloody heroin ever into you since you broke your leg? No, it doesn't even come up. Discharged, off you go. Might feel a bit ropey for 24 hours, then you're gone. But one shot of heroin, whoa, watch out, you'll be an addict for life. You will. It's inconsistent and illogical. It doesn't make any sense.
Totally. And yeah, that's true. We are actually now, I love that you raised it, thinking about, yes, there are similarities across different jurisdictions, but they all have their own rule book, you know.
They have their own rule book. But it's the illogicality, the illogic. There's no word for what I'm trying to describe. But let's look at, like, what's the other example? This came up last week because somebody, I can't remember who, but some great person approached the government about changing the driving laws again, right? And the example was used by the New South Wales government and our premier, who basically came out and said, yes, but we're not going to support it because we don't know if THC use was legal or illegal, even if they've got a script. And everyone went, oh, yeah, right, that makes sense. Doesn't make sense. If you have a dexamphetamine script, you can be on the meth pipe all weekend.
Yeah.
If you've got an opiate script, you can smoke heroin all weekend. Benzos, they don't even check if you've got a script if it comes up on the swab. So the argument that I don't know if THC was illegal or legal is illogical and flawed by virtue of what's already going on with that swab and the drugs that are on it.
Yeah.
Well, this is my point. It's illogical. Sure, your point makes sense. So you've got to ban people driving for using any of those other drugs that have a street version. Because they all have a street version. Opiates, street version. Heroin, dexamphetamine, street version. Meth, looks the same on a swab. No different. Line lights up, says opiate, amphetamine.
Yeah.
So it's illogical. The argument doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's because we're doing it on a per substance basis, and even sort of being forced under the legal framework to have to talk about street version of opioids versus, you know, pharmaceutical. I mean, it's the same, you know, like, I guess from my point of view, the paradigm through which we should be conceding legislation of this kind relating to road safety is impairment. That's it, right? Just look at it through impairment. That's all that matters. That's why 0.05 and above matters. That's why, you know, like, this is how it's done in Tassie. Tassie, is the only state in Australia, you know all this, where you can drive whilst being prescribed a medical cannabis product, and the legislation just says, to the extent that you're not impaired, this is permissible.
Well, one of David Halburn's great facts that he told me was that when the drink driving laws came in, road fatalities tanked. It revolutionized our roads. Right decision to make, no argument. The drug driving laws came in, nothing changed.
Yeah.
Not one single stat. So clearly it's had no effect on road safety whatsoever. So therefore it is illogical to argue that it was done for road safety. And back to your point about impairment, I agree. But we have a system that can pick and choose based on, I don't know what, because opiates, prescribed or unprescribed, to the policeman by the side of the road, it's the same line, swab line, dexamphetamine, methamphetamine, benzos, whether it's a legal or an illegal script. It's a line. So the policeman gets a line.
Yeah.
You know, now if it's opiates, benzos, or amphetamines, what do they do to find out whether they've been on the ice pipe or they have ADHD and prescribed dexamphetamine? And so then to say that they're not going to do that for THC, that's just open to every kind of abuse.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense. It's completely flawed, in fact.
No.
You either don't do it or you do it. You can't pick and choose depending on political climate or what people think. That's not how society should work. But it is how society works, as we're proving. And same with cannabinoid prescriptions.
Yeah, as a tail end on that thought as well, is like, it's one thing for the drug driving laws to have not achieved the object of road safety, but it's another thing altogether where actually those laws have caused needless harm to the lives of people who have had to come before the courts that, you know, you referenced earlier, Magistrate David Halpern, you know, these magistrates are in a really unenviable position. They know these laws aren't working to achieve the object that they want to. And instead there's all these people, you know, getting convicted who, you know, that hangs over them. It prevents them from gaining meaningful employment and all sorts of unintended consequences. They can't leave. They can't enter maybe a foreign country like America or something because they have it's
criminal record.
Yeah.
And I'm just, as you're speaking, I'm just reflecting and thinking that, you know, I was thinking about doctors. We have this fairly central ethical premise of doing no harm. And I suspect magistrates probably have a similar one.
Yeah.
Politicians don't, obviously.
No.
But that's the thing with these are fairly serious. Like most people who are doctors take that very seriously. But that's what we do all day, you know. And to cast aspersions about our characters or our professional capabilities because we prescribe cannabis. If you make a complaint against me and want me struck off because I'm an abortion doctor, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
That complaint is valid because I'm prescribing CBD THC. And that's the point. It's actually showing the very issue of how our society is constructed, because, oh no, that's valid. He cannot like what you're doing, doctor, because you're prescribing cannabinoids, and we agree. But if it's things like abortion, that doesn't fly. You call me and make a complaint that I'm doing something that you don't like. You're in there talking to whoever, because part of being a doctor is tolerating different people's views and opinions, being able to find the middle ground for the benefit of one's patients in order to do no harm.
Well, let's talk about that for a sec, because this is this area where I'm very interested in, you know, the fact that because medical cannabis is an unapproved therapeutic good, I imagine that those who, for ideological reasons, where I just firmly believe that they're brainwashed by what Nixon started back in the 60s, the war on drugs, but the stigma that they attach to this, to cannabis, is that it could never possibly be used therapeutically. And so they've got that ideological bent. And so I have heard from the field that doctors like this will happily complain about doctors who prescribe. And this is just, this is yet another barrier as we're unpacking all of them. We will try and end this podcast, by the way, with an optimistic note, because I don't want to doom and gloom here.
Well, this is optimism, because this is three people saying, you know, we're not putting up with it anymore.
Yeah, that's
basically
true.
This is
absolutely
entirely
solidarity.
Optimistic. We just have to talk about the stuff that, that you know, the email said it. It's not balanced. Well, this is balanced. This is all of the other side of the balance, and it's not
totally
nice.
The side you hear less about, in my
I feel story time coming on with Dr. Jamie here, but I just wanted to get back to the point that we'd gone through 1 and 2 out of 5, but we got sidetracked.
We got to do the rest.
So might not work.
And for those who are listening to this podcast rather than watching it on YouTube, I just want to assure you we're not like vaping flower while we're doing this, and that's why we forgot about 3, 4, and 5. But sorry, Mitch, what were you saying?
Is that one of the side effects? I don't think Jamie listed that. I'm not sure. So might not work. Side effects. So basically, just like any other drug.
So like any other drug, it might not work, and there are side effects. Yep. So 3. The fact that we're even having this conversation, I think would be a good, you know, the fact that it's so illogical that people, you know, for virtually everything people could say that's a negative about it or something they don't like, I can probably give them a fairly good, balanced, reasonable, logical, scientific explanation as to what happened. So a good one, for instance, is that I had THC when I was 17 and it was raining, and I had a terrible time. You know, I had a really bad experience. It's like, sure, how much did you have? I don't know. Oh, what did you have? Well, I don't know. Oh, right. So you took an undefined amount of something that you don't know what it was, and you're never going to touch it again because you had a bad experience. Yes, Great. Let me give you an analogy. If the first time you had alcohol, someone gave you some fairly average hooch and you downed the whole bottle, what would happen?
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be sick. Oh, right. And you'd probably never drink again, would you? No, I wouldn't. Right. So when we give people large quantities of unregulated drugs that might be full of poison in large quantities, bad things happen. So
I have to say, it's the perfect analogy, because I hark back to some parties that Mitch and I attended in high school. And I'm pretty sure we did overdo certain things that we would never dream of touching now, like, Carlton Cold, terrible beer.
No, that's like, I use the exact same analogy. I'm like, let's go out to the bar and have a shot of isopropyl. You know, it's like,
exactly.
Yeah,
I think Mitch got on the passion pot back in the day, actually. But anyway, but
just keep that one to yourself, mate. It's true. It's 100% true.
It's out there. But sorry. So there's also, I know we touched on it before, but I'm just putting in again another shout out for anecdotal evidence. I mean, I don't know how you override that, but.
So hold on, are you saying number 3 is that stigma or?
I think, what are we saying? The bad side of cannabis. So number 3 would be having to have discussions like this. Having to point out simple, basic truths and logical facts about human existence that seem to be thrown out the window.
I see. So like misinformation
and stigma, and the power of
totally,
that. But the bad side of cannabis is spending your life having silly conversations that don't make any sense when you look at the facts. So that's the bad side of cannabis, is dealing with the stigma rather than the stigma itself.
In Australia, I don't think people deal with that anymore in North America, for example. Well, no, at least much less, if at all.
But it's worth remembering the journey that Australia has been on, where Victoria, the Access to Medical Cannabis Act, the first state, that was 2016. So this is seemingly brand new in our recent, kind of living memory. And so imagine being a doctor like yourself, Jamie, pre-2016. And we know some of the people who I genuinely deeply respect, who flew the flag before we even had the framework, who just wanted to help people and knew that they were up against it. They didn't even have a legal mechanism under which to write prescriptions and to give people access to safe products. So, that's the history right there recently.
Totally. I mean, we can probably include in number 3 then the fear that those of us who are doing it still have to deal with, because of people making unreasonable complaints that are based in, they're not based in fact. And then those complaints going to organizations that then maybe have the same, like you said, the same kind of viewpoint. So they perpetuate something that's fundamentally flawed in the outset. But is still being pushed forward. Psychedelics is a good one. I still feel a bit uncomfortable talking about it on webinars. And that's the old fear of, but certainly 2.5 years ago when I started talking about it, I was really not very comfortable talking about an article in the New England Journal of Medicine saying that psilocybin was more effective than escitalopram for depression. And I'm still worried about getting in trouble for that.
And I imagine things like the decision that came down from the TGA late last year to not down schedule, to Schedule 8 psilocybin and MDMA continues to stoke that fear, because you're effectively, hearing from the medicines regulator, oh, no. This is just for clinical trials, and very small ones at that. And, we do not want this getting out into, mainstream prescribing practices around the country. Not that was ever touted as a likely outcome of the down scheduling decision, but that would stoke the fear. And I know we're full of praise we had Peter Hunt from Mind Medicine on the show, and he's doing great work, I think, giving doctors a toolkit to be able to, when the time comes, participate in this type of therapy.
But what's interesting though, Andrew, is that Peter Hunt, as lovely as he is also a very, very successful human being who does not have to deal with the wrath of certain institutions for saying things that may or may not be controversial.
That's true.
The people who want to use those medicines are fearful of the wrath that might come on them for talking about it.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying with number 3. I think that for those of us who prescribe, there's still a fair amount of judgment which can cause problems for us.
Yeah.
And the illogicality, the lack of logic, the lack of transparency, the lack of consistent rules across a regulatory framework puts us in a fairly vulnerable position, in fact.
And then you have to exercise. I mean, it's, in my view, having seen the stigma that you see, particularly from, I've got to say it because, there is a reason why I think older people in the medical profession pump the fear and have sort of created the stigma, is because they've lived with the war on drugs longer than anyone else. And so it's conceivable to me that you, as a budding doctor trying to do your best for your patients, are the subject of a complaint. That complaint makes its way to your medical board in whatever state or territory you're in. And if you have, in that whole process, a group of people who are ideologically stacked against you, you might have an adverse outcome.
Exactly.
In terms of the way you sort of traverse through that system. And then what are your appeal options? And the whole time, you were just trying to do the best for your patients. But yeah, I don't know if you guys agree, but I feel like that is a genuinely conceivable thing that could happen to a doctor.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, if it has, I'm not sure we'd know about it, but certainly if that happened to you, you can keep your trap shut afterwards, aren't you?
Yeah. Yep.
So let's refine 3 earlier. The fear, this culture of fear, this culture, a la some of the comments that were made by another practitioner, which you mentioned earlier, Andrew. There is a real aggression and there's a real malice against those of us who are doing it and talking about it. And that is the negative side of it, because we're not being given a fair go. We're not just being allowed to get on with it. There are people doing the wrong thing for sure. And that needs to be looked at. But again, it needs to be done within a framework of a fair system that, you're innocent until proven guilty.
What's the big kind of deal in a sense? Why are there people that are so outspoken, do you think, against cannabis? Like, if in one mind, wouldn't you just kind of be like, if I really thought it didn't work and I'm a practitioner, wouldn't I just kind of be like, yeah, it doesn't work. You can go, give it a shot somewhere. It's snake oil, basically. Like, what's the... Well,
I think that's a really good point, Mitch. And I think it depends how vitriolic you've been about it. So if you're just one of those guys, it's like, well, whatever. I think it's all rubbish, but you go and have a go if you want, If you're that kind of doctor, you've got nothing to lose. But if you've been out there singing from the rooftops that we're all crackers and should all go to prison, and then it turns out that the human endocannabinoid system is basically the reason that a lot of people have chronic health conditions, and when we treat it, we fix it and they get better. And for MDMA to be able to cure PTSD and psilocybin in the right people, in all of this in the right people, because it doesn't work sometimes, cure depression, anorexia, substance abuse, smoking, it's very challenging for all those people to be downright wrong, having spent years wanting us all locked up, because we're wrong or they're wrong. And at the moment, that's it. We're toe to toe. Who's right? Who's wrong? And they're wrong. I can tell you, they are wrong. And
well, I was going to say the results kind of just sort of speak for themselves in the sense that you said at the start, it might not work for you, right? But for those who it does work for, that's great. And I can't believe if you have people who have been approved for more than 90 medical conditions, I mean, it is totally,
but it totally ties into that on a human level. What is the problem with prescribing an unregistered medicine for someone, as long as you don't break the rules, which none of us do mostly. We prescribe it appropriately because we're doctors and we value the fact we have a job so we can look after our kids and pay our mortgages.
Yeah.
That isn't something that we take particularly lightly.
No.
You know what I mean?
And that's what's on the line when
That's
we
what's
talk
on the line.
about the fear.
Exactly.
You know, that's your ability to practice. Okay,
Yes.
so let me in some of the
Hold on, we still haven't got to number 4 and 5.
Well, hold
yet.
on. So, let me just go back, because on a human level, we give someone a bit of CBD, a bit of THC, a bit of both. Maybe they vape it and they get better.
and
we have a problem with that.
Yeah.
That's what I find bad. So, okay, you hate the stuff, you hate me, you hate Mitch and Andrew, you hate us all.
That's very common, by the way.
Everyone hates us. We're the most hated men in the world, right? But we give someone a balanced oil and we change their life. So ignore the men you hate. What about the person whose life's just changed? You're going to take that off them because what? You don't like the fact it works, or you don't understand the physiology, or there's not enough RCTs.
You think it's a placebo? Like
you think it's a placebo, but whatever they're saying, but that person is really happy.
Yeah.
And that person is feeling good for the first time in quite some time.
And so that's what they forget, right? Is that
just leave it there, isn't it? Just let them be happy and be pain-free and sleep.
Absolutely. You know, and if you think otherwise about the cause of that person's positive outcome, great, but it really doesn't matter in the scheme of things. And I guess, I look at, you know, what are the reasons why? Because I'm in a couple of those Facebook groups where people talk about their experiences taking medical cannabis. And in my opinion, they're all, you know, it's a really honest account, because you have people in there that say it didn't work for me. You have people saying it's, you know, been truly life-changing. And so you get a whole array of perspectives. And I think one of the reasons why people tend to, you know, be so glowing in their enthusiasm for the medicine on some occasions is because they're treatment resistant. They've been living with something that hasn't had a medicine that could really help them for so long. You know, imagine, you know, and you see these people in your clinic, Jamie, you've helped them, and they're just, you know, years and years and years of only achieving so much with conventional medicines. And then they try this and maybe it doesn't work. And if it does work, it can be so much better than what they've had to date. So they just want to get on and talk about that experience. And who could take that away from them?
All the experience itself. I mean, this is on a very human level. Forget everything else. On a human level, why would you deny someone that experience?
Totally.
What law or what thinking justifies that's the right thing to do? Because I don't see it personally.
No.
And if you think even deeper, because one of the major problems, so we said doesn't work, side effects, this being in this industry, dealing with what we've all had to deal with, the conversations we've all had to have, which are just us being logical and scientific, and, you know, and I know you guys have had them as well. So that was number 3, right? You know, number 4 is, maybe it's not number 4 yet, but this, when we think about being human and allowing people to try something that maybe changes their life, but then people talk about this, the dark side of cannabis, dependence, abuse. Is that an inanimate plant's fault? Or is there something else going on? Because those same people might drink too much, they might use meth, they might be abusive to their partners, because they have trauma, they have serious problems because they've had a very difficult life.
Yeah.
And it seems to me more and more, even to say that you know, pound for pound, go to Dan Murphy's, it's like, but what you're speaking to is addiction. What you're speaking to is trauma, and people having to try and manage their nervous systems in with external substances because of what's happened to them. And so this whole thing about blaming the plant for something that is a problem in society, I don't know where I'm going with this, but do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like
I get what you
totally
mean.
do.
stuff. It's not the plant's fault.
I would say that arguably, though, you could extend that to any drug.
No, you can extend it. That's what I'm saying. Any drug. Totally. We have lots of really nasty street drugs that have a medical format. We've already talked about heroin, methamphetamine. They have a medical format. Lignocaine, xylocaine. A very clever dentist put cocaine on someone's tongue, on someone's gum, and realized it made them numb.
Yeah.
You know, so they thought, why is that happening? And they looked into it, and scientifically it blocks the sodium channel in the membrane, so the nerve can't transmit. So the science of cocaine as a local anesthetic is because it blocks a sodium channel, so it prevents depolarization and continuation, so you get no sensation. So someone said, oh, can we adapt that and make it longer acting or shorter acting or more potent or less potent or injectable? And then they came up with local anesthetics. Yeah. So even that has its roots in what is considered a street drug.
It's amazing. I think I agree in the sense that, you know, the whipping boy, or for want of a better term, is you know, the substance itself. But as you say, there's every patient has their own life that they've led up to that point, their own experiences, their own, you know, different reasons for approaching the consumption of their medicine, or, you know, anything really is just, it's totally variable. And to kind of fix criticism just to the very thing that they're taking misses the mark by not accounting for that.
Totally.
Yeah. I have to do a special shout out to lignocaine or lidocaine, especially the spray version in a bottle after sunburn, especially in the Byron Bay region where you are. I'm very glad for the development of that one, but it was definitely for acute pain.
I'm sure you can find some cocaine to rub on it around here.
Well,
no doubt.
Didn't try that. But on the gums though, no, I'm just kidding. Okay, so are we at 4 yet?
Well, we're starting on 4. I'm not sure this is relevant for 4 though, is it? Because all we're really saying is leave the plant alone and deal with some deeper issues in society.
Yeah.
Which is the theme of what we're saying, isn't it? Whether it's the institutions that approve medicines, the doctors within them that prescribe them, or the society that needs a reason to make it a whipping boy. There are some remarkably illogical, unscientific, biased viewpoints that are coming through, and all of that, and Jung would love this, right? You know, it would be shadow, wouldn't it? Be all the stuff, all those, for every finger you point, there's 5 pointing back at you.
Yes.
You know, and it's the shadow. And I think that's very much what we're talking about, that we are copying all of that coming our way, but it's not actually us who are doing it. It's where it's coming from that are the ones that are doing it. They're being illogical. They're being unscientific. They're being biased. They're not looking at the facts and what's in front of them. They're sticking to a story that's been perpetuated for a few decades and has been undeniably proved to be utter rubbish. And in fact, nefarious. And we're not even going to go into that about cotton and pharmaceuticals and hemp and why it happened. You know, it's so obvious once you look at the facts. But all those fingers are pointing back at us all the time. You guys are really bad.
Yeah, and it's you know, we will let you participate in our system, but you will participate only under our rules in our system. We control absolutely everything, and it's this binary of approved, unapproved, and the consequences that flow from that. And it's really,
it's so confusing. But sometimes even approved, as we talked about with opiates, approved, especially in the US, but you know, FDA are pretty strict, TGA are probably a bit stricter, but nonetheless approved, prescribed by GPs. Oh no, sorry, evidence is wrong, you can't prescribe it anymore. Oh, but that's the evidence that's there to protect us. That's the very point of the system that is a pillar of our therapeutic, you know, system that goes through the trials and it's safe and you approve it. Oh, you mean that's not true? That it can go through the trials and really not be that safe, and in fact dangerous despite the trials? oh, well, we wouldn't put it like that. It's like, well, how would you put it then? Because that's essentially what's happened. And I'm not saying anything about cannabis other than I was allowed to prescribe opiates for a long time, and now I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, yeah, absolutely. The inconsistency is just there in plain sight to be seen. Out of interest, as a prescribing doctor, what is the kind of current, maybe we need to deep dive on specific SSRIs, but I wanted to just ask about SSRIs and what the current medical literature or guidance that you have as a prescriber on those.
Yeah, I mean they are prescribed a lot. I prescribe them. My experience of them was that they're great for some people, but certainly they're never really meant to be long term, and I think that's what the evidence shows as well. But there's a lot of people on them long term. So plus it's another good example of a cyst syndrome or a condition that didn't exist prior to the introduction of that medicine.
Yeah, well, that raises my skeptical.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's go back to cannabis. There's no CBD withdrawal syndrome.
No.
There's no THC withdrawal syndrome. I mean, sure, there's dependence and it gets a bit uncomfortable and maybe people have to deal with some difficult feelings, but
I've also never heard somebody link suicidal ideation to cannabis use, right?
Exactly.
And I think about, you're prescribing something for someone's mental health, and one of the side effects may include suicidal ideation. I mean, that just doesn't stack at all for me. I can't even fathom that.
Well, also the lethal dose, try to find that in cannabis. It's pretty
toxicity
difficult.
Of medical cannabis. How many is that?
I don't think there is any, is there?
Yeah.
No, there isn't. There are no receptors in the lungs or the heart or the brainstem. So you basically can't die of a cannabis overdose.
Yeah, well, I think
it's sufficiently expensive enough for
it's too expensive to die.
Yeah, you'd have to be Gina Reinhardt to.
I think they've tested.
They have. I can't remember the exact figure, but I worked it out, and it was some kind of milligram per kilogram of CBD that you would have to have in order to get some beginning of some serious
1,000 milligrams per kilogram body weight is still safe.
You'd have to, if you drank
a gram per kilo,
you could drink 10 grams worth of CBD and be safe.
Yeah.
So you're talking.
I've tried
50 bottles.
Yeah, well, I mean, and THC, I think also, I don't quote me on this one, but 800 milligrams per kilo.
It's huge. You'd be asleep before you got anywhere close.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, you can watch on YouTube. We were watching the other day a guy do I think 2.7 gram dab of THC, which was at 80 or 90%, strength. And whilst he looks definitely worse for wear by the end of it, he was not dead.
I mean, it was pretty much like one of those
videos
of, yeah, it's like one of those videos of somebody just, necking a bottle of vodka or something like that. Like it's just
that's actually more dangerous.
Yeah,
probably is.
True.
I mean, I would say that is not in the spirit of what we're trying to achieve medically. So
I would
absolutely.
I would argue
bordering on a bit stupid, to be fair.
Yeah.
However, being stupid is not a crime.
Yeah, correct. But I do have to say, when having spent some time in North America, working in cannabis over there, the Americans can push it. They can definitely push it to the point at where it feels like the equivalent of the heroin of cannabis, if that makes sense. Like just this super form of cannabis that is just so far removed from the original kind of intention that it's like, oh, okay, I get why this is, people.
It's a bit Wild Westy. I mean, one of the things, it's not a bit Wild Westy, it is the Wild West. One of the things I suppose I actually do like about the Australian system, is apart from all the stuff we've talked about, but we are proving that it's a medicine. And there are a lot of very clever, very skilled people in this country devoting themselves to working it out and prescribing it and providing it. And they're not doing it in that vein. There are no bongs in, that's not what we're talking about. And I think that's where Australia is doing a great thing, more so than the US, because we're really using it as a medicine. And this is not taking away anything recreationally, but I just think what we're doing is great. because there is no evidence. So how else do you do it? The only way to do it is the way the TGA are doing it. You know, to get it registered or some kind of registration, whether that's ARTG or something else that hasn't been invented yet. But you know what I mean? So we're doing it right, and we're doing it the right way. And those of us who are authorized, are reporting, you know, we're feeding things back. There's an enormous movement of people doing this. Yet, despite that, we still have to deal with the comments that we started this conversation with.
Yeah.
And the people making the comments. Have you looked at how you become an authorized prescriber? This ain't no headshot, mate. It's not working in with $20 and, you know, yeah, I can smoke 10 grams, dude. Can I prescribe? That's not what we're doing. Far from it, in fact.
Yeah.
You know,
ethics committees,
report. Yeah. So the very nature of those comments is disrespectful and uninformed.
Yeah.
And it goes in one of the major newspapers of our country, and it's acceptable, which harks back to 3. It's not acceptable. It is not acceptable on any level. And if one of us did that, it would be over.
Well, it's sort of as ignorant and reckless, in my view, as a doctor getting that platform and then saying CBDQ is everything.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. If one of us, if we were making those, we were throwing those hand grenades around, we'd be in big trouble, quick smart. But if you're the dean of a college, it seems you can be as illogical and biased as you like. You can put it in a national newspaper and everyone goes, oh, okay, sure. Doesn't make sense, because if that is wrong for me, it's wrong for him. If it's wrong for you, it's wrong for him. That's the point that we're making, that you can't be selective about the rules. The rules is the rules. So you obey them. Doesn't matter who you are.
Well, I expect I know the answer, given how widely maligned and hateable we all are. So
we're all dressed in black tonight as well.
So detestable that we are. I suspect.
I forgot my Death Reaper scythe.
I suspect Michael is not listening to our podcast, but if he is, Michael, you are welcome to come on to the podcast anytime. We'd genuinely be interested in hearing from you, but
he wouldn't come on be listening to something as biased as this. So.
Yeah, I know. We just
totally one-sided, this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mitch, did you cash that check today from all our sponsors? I think that should have come in.
Yeah, it was minus $100. Well, in the interest of seeing out these 5 points, I'm just wondering if is there a fourth and fifth point, or of the harm, or the negatives?
I think we'd gotten to 5, if I recall. So there was.
It feels like we're about
might
10.
Not work. Side effects.
Jamie didn't let us know there's 1, 2, 3, 3.5, 3.7, 3.9, and 4, and then 5.
Mate, we can keep going to 12 if you want. No, but it's
where we got 1 and 2. What was 3? The being on Stigma. The receiving end of.
If you're a patient, what are the 5? The 5 negatives. You might, it might not work for you. You might have side effects. You might receive stigmatization or, judgment from other people in the community, something like that.
Not cheap enough.
Yeah, expensive. It is expensive. Yeah.
Totally expensive. Could change. Really, actually, sort of not that expensive when you think about how much you need. And compared to maybe buying it, buying some moonshine.
Yes,
not much different really in price now. So
also, who
not free
alcohol?
I suppose. Let's stick to the bashing cannabis. It's not free. Bastards.
Also, who equates alcohol on a pound for pound basis? I mean, seriously, like, are we talking Hill of Grace? Are we talking Grange, or what's or like?
Let's get scientific, Andrew. In my long experience of observing people drink, it's not pound for pound. I've seen very large men fall over with not much, and very little women drink far more than they should be able to.
Yeah.
So certainly a pound for pound analogy is unscientific and illogical, and pays no respect to genetics, tolerance, and liver function.
But I should expect no more from the person that made those comments.
Just a doctor who's supposed to know everything.
But beyond that, we don't value alcohol in the same way that we're valuing cannabis at the moment, in terms of, you don't pay for a bottle of booze based on the alcohol content.
True.
That's not what you're choosing. So you're not choosing, oh, this one's got 13%, this one's got 14%. Let's go the 14% because it's stronger. Or otherwise we would be actually buying isopropyl, as I said.
Yeah, like cents per megs, whatever you want to, like it's anyway. So yes,
you're buying it for the effect, for the taste, for the, at least in alcohol. And I think the same is you can make that comparison to some degree with cannabis in terms of people wanting an outcome, although it might be more expensive in some cases. And even within cannabis, different types or brands or what have you, that you're paying.
Yeah. Sorry, you go.
No, that's all right. I was just going to say you're just paying for a different type of outcome as a result to, than a 20 pack of your favorite benzos.
All right, I got a fifth one potentially, which I just want to ask about. Is it fair to say that medical cannabis might adversely interact with other medications that someone could be on?
Theoretically. Yes, of course it could. We know that. The major way that drugs interact, really, that we worry about in medical practice, there's some interesting stuff around sort of cancer treatments, immunotherapy, and maybe how CBD can block that, which, in that case, don't use CBD when they're on those treatments, full stop. And that's what the immunologists and the oncologists will tell us about once they know for sure. There's the CYP450, which is the liver enzymes, which is the major one for CBD because it is an inducer. So if someone's on warfarin, for instance, and as much as we haven't got much data, there have been some fairly hefty doses given to people who were on warfarin, sort of case studies, elephant doses, and it was theoretical. And I've got to say that in all of my years of prescribing and managing warfarin, it's been very rare for me to see it change due to other drugs or what people eat. So, these are very valid scientific and theoretical considerations when prescribing medicines, but in the real world, how does it play out? Which I'm just speaking from my experience. So with warfarin, I haven't seen it play out. With other drugs, I haven't seen any interactions that I need to worry about. And I do say this to patients, and I often, it's a bit of an anecdotal comment, but cannabis doesn't really have any enemies. Pretty much gets on with most people and most drugs that we prescribe, and it makes
except pain specialists.
Well, yeah, the enemies. it's cannabis doesn't pick fights; it's the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's for sure.
No, so okay, so in summary, in the spirit of a fair and balanced discussion on this wonderful topic that produces so many strong opinions, we can say that in presenting that other side, it might not work for you. Okay, well, that's sort of just an indifferent kind of outcome, a neutral outcome, shall we say. Yep. You still have the same medical condition as you did when you tried it. So side effects include eating a whole strawberry cheesecake. No, but in all, I don't want to.
I feel like we've repeated these 5. It's like Jamie's 5 commandments now. It's turning into like say them all again from the top, Andrew.
No, so okay, number 3, the fear and stigma. Number 4 is the pricing, how expensive it can be, and 5, a rare chance of bad interaction with other,
theoretically, but not really.
But again, that's a bit neutral because it goes with 1 and 2, which is it might not work and you might get side effects. And it might interact. So that actually applies to anything you prescribe.
It's probably 5's probably access, like figuring out how the hell to do it is half the battle for people.
And I think, do you know what? That's a good point, Mitch. And I think that's where the lottery comes in, because I think a lot of people are interested. And a lot of people, it takes them quite some time to come up with the courage to talk to their doctors about it. To the point that I say to patients, Dr. X at that practice prescribes, and they're like, well, no, I didn't know that. You know, because they're not even, you know, some of them are too scared to even ask. And then, so if they do eventually sum up the courage to ask their doctor, they get one of two reactions, really, yes or no. And for a lot of people, it's still no. And a lot of people who have complex chronic health conditions, one of the things they value most in this world is their relationship with their GP. And when their GP makes them feel like a piece of shit for asking about cannabis, they're never going to ask again.
Yeah.
Because they value that relationship more than finding out if cannabis will work for them.
And then even if they get a lottery ticket that at least provides them with access, they have a doctor that says, yeah, you've been treatment resistant to a few things. Let's give it a try. Then it's not like they get the prescription and can just roll up to a pharmacy and get the product. I mean, maybe if they're sort of at a vertically integrated clinic and dispensary model, but usually for most people, they have to wait for that medicine to arrive at their community pharmacy that they pick it up from. I mean, so there's just this kind of, it's waiting and waiting just to get access to something that could really help them. Totally.
But I think it's a bit of a lottery. I think that's what we're getting at, right? Because if people end up here and they bring the right paperwork and they, you know, they present well and it's all good, which I might add is the vast majority of human beings that I encounter are not trying to do one over. They're not trying to get stoned. They're not trying to sell it. They just want some help. You know, they don't all need to be treated with suspicion because they're asking for cannabis, you know. But if they do, there are those of us who've worked out. I can tell you every single day, I still have people saying, Jesus, I didn't know you could even do this last week. Let alone meeting people like me who do it right and then try and facilitate their experience. Because again, that's not cannabis dependent. That's good customer service. Any business, any service, you meet someone nice, they treat you well. You know, you order a TV, you don't wait 10 weeks for the bloody thing, do you?
No.
Mostly you take it home with you that day. And if you have ordered it online, you've got the shits if it's not there 7 days later. Totally. You know, that's just customer service. So there's a whole load of us who've understood that to run a successful business, you have to provide a service. And that's what we do. And unfortunately, that is so rare in this country still, really, despite the mushroom clouding that's happened with, you know, clinics and doctors. It's still, your odds are really stacked against you to have an enjoyable experience that's smooth, where you're given the appropriate prescription. And then I think the other thing as well that's a bit sad is more and more people dabbling and starting CBD and giving someone 10 milligrams BD twice a day and nothing happening, and then everyone writing it off. And it's like, what did you think was going to happen with 10 milligrams twice a day?
Yeah.
You know, 130 kilo man who's on 20 BD of OxyContin, 300 of Lyrica and Semendone, and you thought 10 milligrams of CBD would cut it. But that's fine because they don't know. But when they don't know and they prescribe, and then that's two people lost because the doctor doesn't believe it anymore and the patient doesn't. But actually, they're just not being treated properly, which sort of then ties back to the medical profession thing. Just because you can prescribe it doesn't mean you know what you're doing.
That's a really good point. I think about the lost patients who might have been prescribed a bad product, but we don't think about the lost doctor as well. That's really quite salient, because, you know, they're taking a risk to just even put themselves out there and write a prescription. But if they don't know,
well, they're not though, really. I mean, that's the point. They're taking a risk because of what we've been talking about, the perception of what we're doing, which is the disadvantage of doing this. You know, it's tiger country. You know what I mean? There's people with nukes and hand grenades left, right, and center that just want to blow us up. But actually, we get permission from our federal government to prescribe a therapeutic good that's, even though it's unregistered, for a named condition that has failed first line. There's nothing risky about that.
No,
nothing whatsoever. Selling them illegally, giving them 5 grams of flour on day one, taking the piss. You're probably going to get in trouble. And you probably should.
Yeah, it should
But the
be.
reality is there's no risk. If it's prescribed appropriately and you've gone through the right regulatory hurdles, there shouldn't be a single risk. And as we started before we were recording, I am dealing with situations where I haven't done anything wrong at all. And I'm dealing with a system that would love it that I have done something wrong and therefore wants to find it.
Yeah.
Basically.
And
I would love to hear a little bit more about that if you're happy to share. If not,
let's just say we can say as much as it's someone with a hand grenade who wants to throw it at me because they don't like what I'm doing. And that is, as Jung would say, their shadow. That's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah. I agree with the Jung analogy. Actually, it's beautifully put, because it's this, it's somebody else's axe to grind. They've got the problem, but there is always a risk with somebody who does have an axe to grind that by just pure chance the system stacks in their favor. But I would like to think that appropriate appeal options would be available in the unlikely event of having a whole bunch of people with the same ideological bent.
I mean, I think there's a lot of people who've been given a hard time in recent years over this. I know, colleagues have told me what they've been through too. So it's not new but most of the time it doesn't, like you're saying, it doesn't really come to anything.
Yeah.
It's just a little pissing contest, really, isn't it? It's just, it's a little bit of muscle flexing, and we don't like what you're doing. But that just ties back to the same thing. Why not do some reading, talk to us?
Yeah.
You'll find that actually with all really good people who've understood that this is basically very, very safe and very, very effective. And therefore we wish to continue prescribing it in the right way for the right people.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it. Anything beyond that is it's shadow, it's bullying, it's unacceptable, and it's not acceptable anymore.
It also just adds to your workload to have to be responsive to, complaints that have no evidence to substantiate anything. It is just so annoying that, doctors like yourself who are actually just trying to help people. I mean, how many complaints to the HCCC did you ever write about doctors who were quite liberally prescribing opioids 10 years ago? It just doesn't make sense.
Well, it gets in that. That also is a deeper question, isn't it? Because what would drive you to do that? What would drive me to do that? I believe in communication and I believe in working things out. So if I had a problem with something that someone was doing, I would pick up the phone and have a chat with them.
Yeah.
Or I'd write them an email. And if they then wrote back and said, bleep, 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 you're a bleep, 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 I'm going to bleep, 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 and then I'm going to murder you, then I'd probably make a complaint about that.
Yeah. I like that there is at least a complaint threshold here.
There's a complaint, absolutely, but it
depends on the bleeps.
Well, exactly.
How many bleeps?
Exactly. It depends on the bleeps. But you know what I mean? It's part of this whole thing, this whole sort of really dark, strange, nebulous entity, let's call it, that we're all dealing with whilst trying to bring these medicines through on a much larger scale. And we've called it unconscious stigma, we've called it shadow, but it's really
bad actors.
Bad actors.
I call it bad actors. I know there are people genuinely in our, in the landscape that are doing things just clearly in bad faith. And I don't know what their incentive structure is, but they have to stare in the face of, good evidence against what they're doing, and they still proceed to act the way that they do. I'm like, well, you're a bad actor.
Yeah, but it's probably the same thing that drove Nixon. The same thing that drove the men off their land in the US, back at the turn of the previous century before the last one. This is what I'm sort of trying to bring attention to. What is this horrible thing that gets into people that makes them believe that they can behave like this towards those of us who aren't actually doing anything wrong. Because
Yeah.
we're not, and there's nothing wrong with this plant really. When we've talked about the negatives medically, you want to talk about the negatives on the recreational side. That's not what this talk is about, but we can also openly talk about dependence and addiction and all that stuff. We can openly talk about that as well, because it's true. It happens, and not infrequently. We can talk about the crap people are smoking when they buy it off the street and all the poisons that are in it, and how we're not protecting people from that in any way really by having prohibition, so there's all this kind of other, it's like, what is it, what's this really dark, horrible thing that drives people to act in these fairly violent ways towards their colleagues and other human beings because they don't like what they're doing?
And I think I was saying before we jumped on that, in the legal profession, we have actually professional conduct rules that say that you have to treat another legal practitioner with respect. Now, I know that for some listeners, they might be sort of laughing and thinking, do lawyers ever do that? But in all seriousness, I always, in the line of work that I've ever been in, just can't even fathom, openly being rude and aggressive to someone. Like it's just not, it's not the way we should behave professionally. And it's a sad state of affairs when people, are willing to genuinely behave like that in their line of work. It's terrible.
What is it that you're so angry about?
What
that, because it's real vitriol, it's real murderous rage, it's really, really profound.
Yeah.
And it's like, what, because of cannabis? Really? That's what's led to your feelings about cannabis, have led you to be this kind of a human being?
Yeah. Like,
I don't think so. I think there's something else going on here.
Yeah, totally. Like, would you feel that same level of raw emotion that caused you to make a complaint against another GP if you were driving in a field and you just saw cannabis out the window of your car? Like, does that plant stir so much, kind of rage inside you that
exactly? Because that's the point, Andrew, that rage that's inside you. We've talked about some comments that were made by other professionals. We've alluded to what's going on here. I've alluded to it happening with other colleagues. That rage, that absolute rage. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to take away your ability to make a living. That's how angry I am that you've prescribed this for someone.
Yeah.
That's got nothing to do with cannabis.
No.
And the fact that that's being missed on this level in our society, that to me is much more of a problem.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I mean, there is some very small amount of comfort that I take that a lot of these bad actors, or who I would consider to be bad actors in the space, are generally, as I said earlier, they're people that have lived with the stigma and the propaganda for longer than you or I have, with Nixon's war on drugs, and they're going to leave the profession sooner than you will. And I do take a bit of comfort in that, to be honest.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, also we're talking about stuff that's the subject of, fairly intensive psychoanalysis to get to the roots of this rage in people, So it's indicative of a fairly, I think what we've probably really confirmed tonight is that we have a fairly sick society that doesn't really have logical rules and treat all with equality of fairness and logic and science and compassion. And cannabis is really a very good way for that shadow and vitriol to be legitimately pointed at innocent people. So rather than punching me in the face and getting a criminal record, they can do it a different way. And then, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, that bloody cannabis. Do you know what I mean? So the behavior is being excused because of the stigma that's still semi being accepted, and that's the problem, I think.
Yeah, totally. And it's they know that even when you have a situation where you've done nothing wrong, there's nothing really, for anyone to see, you will always be able to rely rely on people's stigma and fear about cannabis when you raise problems about what somebody who is involved with cannabis is doing.
Exactly.
You know, it's leveraging that 50, 60 years of stigma and using it as an underpinning of your, you know, kind of baseless complaint. That's all you've got. That's all you're sort of leaning on. But anyway,
I think we've nailed it, haven't we? That's the psychology. That's how they get away with what is inexcusable behavior in any other situation.
Yeah.
So they want to behave inexcusably. They're full of rage, and so they use the plant as a vehicle to express that and attack people, knowing full well that they're not actually going to get in trouble because it's controversial.
Yeah. Well, you know,
we covered some ground here tonight.
We did.
And I say their days are numbered. You know, because we are just year on year, I think, getting to a better place. We're in a better place now than we were 5 years ago, for example, right? So we're making a lot of progress, but really do appreciate chatting. I did promise, I think, midway through that I'd end on a sort of an optimistic note. That's the best I've got, is that it's better now than 5 years ago. But you know, hopefully our audience understands that. There are some wonderful cannabis doctors around Australia. We're talking to one of them right now. And, you know, things will get better, but we appreciate you breaking down all the barriers and being prepared to, you know, have a very honest and candid discussion about not only the bad actors, but also reasons why somebody might not actually get something out of medical cannabis. So hopefully that's fair and balanced enough for all of our Altmed critics, all the people that hate us. So, yeah,
troves of them.
Any final word from you, Mitch or Jamie?
I was just going to thank Jamie for coming on and sharing his time yet again. So, thanks for sharing your insights and wisdoms from the coalface as you treat so many people across, I would say actually across the country for things that otherwise they receive very, you know, negative or, you know, hands-off approaches from other doctors they've been to. So, yeah.
Agree.
Thanks, guys. It's been another awesome chat, and the world, I don't know if the world's a better place for it.
Yeah, I was going to say that's sounding pretty grandiose there, but sure.
I hope it's been cathartic.
It's been cathartic, and I've really enjoyed sitting here as the three dark lords of medical cannabis.
Yeah, I know. Sort of the mic drop moment now is when I reveal that all three of us are actually the real bad actors in the system. But no, it's that's how some people might see it. I don't know, but no, I really appreciate you coming on, Jamie, and really a pleasure to chat to you. We might do a round 3. We'll come up.
We'll save that one for a bit of
give you a break for now, but we appreciate it.
Just store up some hand grenades and come back in a few months.
That's actually what just write down each anecdote as they come through every time you've been yelled at, and we can go through them one by one.
Yeah, sounds good.
Nice one, guys. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks so much, Jamie. Till next time. Take care.
Till next time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.